Hi, back at the Rhode Island shore and sharing about my student's journey. In the last video I made, I was discussing the remarkable events that I found unfolding at my visit to John of God in Brazil. There were others regarding John of God, including what could be called a personal healing, but that's a pretty common story. For me, this story was around healing at a deep level for me of my connection with something I'd been guided to by the most reliable source I've ever encountered, the channel Jeshua through the channel JM and in the general body of the work of the Way of Mastery. And what it had told me was that my lifetime in service to this pathway, this is what I was investigating at least, was that a reincarnation of that of King David of Israel. Now, I'm not at all comfortable with even the possibility of this. I wouldn't even be considering it unless I felt it was coming directly from Jeshua. But I hadn't really ever asked if this was true. My mindset was such that I was willing to investigate it. I was willing to investigate all of the things that went along with it. But I wasn't really willing to consider the possibility that that might be real. Nevertheless, I was willing to consider the possibility that JM, the channel of the Way of Mastery, had been John the Beloved. Again, a lot of people believe this kind of thing, and it's not something I'm real comfortable with. But I'm progressing on, just considering the same dynamics as what I think David would have if he was reincarnated, which likely would include trauma around his relationship with perception of guilt, things he'd done that cursed the nation. It's all in the biblical story. So I come back from John of God with this profound healing around this and a comfort with what could be called sitting on the throne again, even if it's just in terms of my relationship with my own energies. And I'm carrying off to my right-hand side. I didn't used to have this type of experience when I was a kid. This sense of a hovering steel gray Star of David, like it's lying there horizontally, just floating next to me. I don't know where that came from, but that's what happened as soon as the healing occurred at John of God. And I come back, and it's May or June of 2011 when I returned back to Massachusetts, where I was living, and I'm beginning to read a book on the life of David. It was one that a friend had given me because she knew I was interested in this subject, and we had just seen someone speak. His last name's Pinsky. He was the poet laureate for the United States. Robert Pinsky, we just seen him speak, and it was this coincidence that the guy that we'd just gone to see speak and thought was interesting had written a book on David. We didn't know that, I think, till after we'd seen him speak. So she got me that for my birthday, and Jeshua spoke to me and said, "A beloved friend, we would have you read this book all day on this birthday," which was going to be the last birthday I'd spend in the house that I grew up in, and really never wanted to live somewhere else. My parents had lived there for 55 years. So it's a big day. The house is going to be sold within a month from then, and a huge transition. And I knew also that there had been scheduled another trip to Israel coming up. All of the trips to Israel I had always seen as having particular functions and particular reasons for them occurring, purposes. And these they're a little hard to describe, but they're part of serving Jeshua in the atonement plan. This one, and everywhere we went, was always relevant. That's important. In this trip, of course, I'm being given all this information about David, which is coming up, and it's pervading my life. I'm reading this book regularly, and it's about his life, and I'm kind of relating to it and feeling into it and feeling the drama and the grief and all these other things. And my birthday's coming up, so I'm going to be spending the whole day reading the book on my birthday. But I'm doing it within the context of knowing that there's a trip coming up, and the places in Israel that the group is going to with JM are very much related to the story of David in a way that they've never been before in any of the previous 5 pilgrimages. The key to this one is, the first one is Ein Gedi, the caves of Ein Gedi, where there's a big part of the David story that takes place in the caves of Ein Gedi. And that's the first place the group is going. It's never been there before. So I know I'm supposed to be there. but I'm really struggling with the idea of getting there. Money's a big issue. It's not inexpensive to go to Israel for 2 weeks and getting there and back. And just the whole thing is a real struggle for me, this idea that I might even go. So I go and I sit down, and also I'm really struggling with this idea of having been King David of Israel. This is like, really struggling with this. I mean, I don't know how anything could possibly convince me that this wasn't just ridiculous. So I'm reading the book. Joshua's told me to. My relationship with him is such that I've seen miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, trillions of synchronicities, incredible life events. So I'm a believer, and I'm following. He says, sit and read the book all day. So I'm reading the book, this called The Life of David by Robert Pinsky. And as I read it, that's a lot of time to read a book. And I'm not just reading it, but I'm feeling into the stories. I'm feeling into the story of his son dying. I'm feeling into the story of him feeling that the nation is cursed because of his misdeeds. And the horror that goes along with that, and feeling this deep sense of guilt and darkness and unhappiness and all these things that occur as a result of his actions, basically. That's the story. And it's a terrible thing. And I'm crying, I'm going through all of these emotions, and I'm getting to the point of thinking it's late in the afternoon on July 19th, 2011, my birthday. And I'm thinking, this is just crazy. How did my life ever get to this place where I'm sitting thinking I might have been King David and reading a book on it, and please, stop. So I finally say, and I'm going through all these emotions about it, and that's really, why am I doing this? And again, the same thing I go back to, this is all crazy, get me out of here. Yeah, I'm willing to listen to that argument by anybody who feels they have a strong enough argument to convince me. Really, I really am willing to listen to that, because I've been trying to convince myself of it, that it's not a genuine path, that what's happening isn't real, that what's happening isn't profoundly altering my perception of reality. I'm willing to listen, and I've been listening to my own critic and my own skeptical voice, which is a pretty vicious skeptical voice, and it's been convinced over and over and over again that this material is legit. And now I'm struggling with the most difficult thing I've ever faced, which is considering that the voice that I trust and love is telling me the most unbelievable thing possible. And that's why I haven't asked. Because I don't really want to hear him say yes or no. No is like, well, what have we been doing for 2 years? And yes would be even more challenging. I also don't know how I could ever hear it that would be meaningful. Nevertheless, I'm there reading. I'm just doing what I'm told. But finally I get to this breaking point and I say, I've had enough of this. Joshua, I need to, and I think to myself, I need to know. I need to ask him. And if the answer was, well, beloved friend, you take on the perceptions of iconic figures in history so that you might understand the dynamics that are playing out within your own soul's journey, that I would get. That makes sense to me. And that would have been easier. So I'm in the middle of just being open to whatever might be received. But I've been reading this book so long that I've got to stop, because I'm emotionally exhausted, and I'm also past my point of willingness to keep going after 5 hours of reading or whatever it's been. Holding the book in my left hand. And so I finally say to Joshua, and what I'm asking him when I say really is was I really King David? Is that really what you're telling me? Because it seems like you are. And the orchestration at John of God was so remarkable. And JM seeming to not dissuade me from believing this was remarkable, and other things are remarkable, and there'd be more to come. But I'm sitting in bed at this time on my birthday, and the book's in my left hand, just on whatever page I was reading at the moment. And I say, come on, Joshua, really? And again, if it's him, anything's possible. I'm saying, really? Was I really this guy? Really? Really? So as I go into that kind of question, my hand, this energy runs through my left hand and just snaps it open, like that. It's totally involuntary. I don't know where it came from. I have no idea what that was. And my hand straightens out and snaps. This is the hand holding the book. and it snaps open to a certain page, not the one that I was on, a new page. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going to be on that page? This is the answer to my question. So I open the page, and the page is the title page for the book, The Life of David. And then directly underneath it, they have the place it's published, the publisher's name, and something else. Maybe the other place it's published, I'm not sure. But I read The Life of David, and then I read the publisher's name. And the publisher's name is Schocken, Schocken. My last name is Schock, spelled the same way as the first part of Schocken, which it's a rare spelling. So the next thing I read, when I finally, after 2 years of daily effort, and the synchronicities of John of God and all these other things that happen, the next thing I read when I actually asked Jeshua directly for the first time, was I truly King David of Israel? My finger snaps open to a book, and the next thing I read is my name, The Life of David Schock. That is the most direct and profound way that I could possibly have gotten guidance. Well, maybe there are other ways, but that's a pretty powerful one. And I will submit to this day, it's one of the most remarkable occurrences I've ever heard of. Like, what are the chances? As I showed it to Jamie, he says, what are the chances that there's even a book that has that in it, that you can read The Life of David Schock, and it's about King David. And my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, she was my girlfriend when I had my fall when I was 16. We were back friends again, and she bought me this book. And my friend said, I knew she didn't buy it because subconsciously she'd seen the publisher's name. But even so, there'd have to be a book that had that publisher's name about David by the guy that we just saw speak. So I felt like I'd been given this as clear as anything could possibly be given in terms of making me believe this unbelievable thing, that I was indeed King David of Israel in a previous life. That's the operating assumption that we're going to go by as I continue my service to Jeshua. I don't claim that. I think that would be nutty, but I'm willing to go forward as if that might be so because of who's telling me. So that's July, and I'm still struggling come August or the end of July with this idea of having to get to Israel. It's very challenging, and the money, as I said, money's a huge issue, and other issues are big issues too, and I've got a lot of resistance to it too. And so I go to change the calendar. I'm thinking about this while I'm changing the calendar, one of these flip-up calendars for August 2011, and I bought a calendar that was an Israel calendar because I like remembering having been there and so on. But I had no idea this was what was on the picture for August. And I go and flip it up as I'm really struggling about this idea of going to I know we're going to Ein Gedi and other places connected with David. And I flip up the calendar, and the calendar has a picture of the David Cave at Ein Gedi. That's the picture on the calendar that I flip up. And I'm so freaked out by this that I go upstairs to splash water in my face, which I don't do usually. And I splash water on my face, and I look down, and there in the soap dish is a new bar of soap. And I asked my wife later, where did that come from? And she didn't remember really putting it there. I'm sure she did, but I'm not. And maybe I bought a bar of soap in Israel once that was like this. And it had carved in it Ein Gedi in the bar of soap. So a lot of things seem to be conspiring. And yes, indeed, in October of that year, I journeyed with really the belief that Jeshua was telling me that I was the reincarnation of King David, returning with people who had been incarnated with him in his life and in previous times before that for sacred purposes. And what was the 6th pilgrimage to Israel will be the subject of the next video. Thank you for listening.